Welcome to Progress in San Diego. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things. I'm your host, Walter Davis. And this evening I have the honor to have Miss Faith Attaguile and Larry Hampshire. And you guys just finished a very interesting journey to the Middle East, correct?
That's correct.
Tell me about that. Tell me what you guys were involved in.
We were involved in a group called Viva Palestina. It's headed by a member of parliament in Britain, George Galloway. This is the third convoy since the Israeli attack on Gaza last December to break the siege that Israel has set up. Nothing gets in and nothing gets out without Israel's approval, which means building construction materials, things they need to rebuild the damage that was done. So it started in London, and this young lady can tell you what happened in London.
Well, it was a convoy of people from 17 different countries. There were, by the end, about 200 vehicles. There were ambulances, minivans, 18-wheeler trucks, all stuffed to the hilt with aid, medical and humanitarian aid. I drove an ambulance from London to Istanbul with two people from Malaysia. They were people from all walks of life, teachers, just working people, students, retired people, and all religions. There were Muslims, Jews, Christians, and the person that I drove the truck with was Hindu. So, and then there were just humanitarians. So it was a very interesting group of about 500 people, and amazingly enough, we all got along. So it was an interesting trip. We had a lot of problems along the way, which we can talk about.
Yeah. Now, you went from London to Istanbul. Did that require taking a ferry over any waterways or anything like that?
Yes, we had we drove through Europe. And when we got to Ancona, Italy, we took a ferry, an overnight ferry. So we had to drive all our vehicles on the ferry, and everybody else had to get on the ferry. And it was about a 14-hour ferry ride to Greece. So we hit Greece about 6 o'clock in the morning and hit the road. Headed toward Thessaloniki and then on to Istanbul.
Uh-huh.
And it was very interesting because the trip through Europe was uneventful. We roughed it. Many times at night we were just in a car park. There were no toilets, no water, nothing. I mean, we were really roughing it. And once we got to the Middle East, everything changed because we just were welcomed in city after city with groups of people, big groups of people just wanting to hug us and thank us for coming and giving us food and providing really much nicer facilities. We were staying in sports arenas mostly. So that was luxury.
So you felt more appreciation when you got to the Middle East. Can you tell me specifically where was that? Where, when you say the Middle East, where were you when this happened?
Well, actually, it was when we hit Turkey that the difference happened. In fact, when we hit the Turkish border, we were greeted with a couple of hundred people that had been waiting there for about 5 or 6 hours because, as usual, we were late. And they waited there and then just greeted us with food and hugs and a lot of welcomes that were very appreciated.
Now, obviously, many Americans may not be aware of what the conditions are, and you took this material to Gaza, correct?
Correct.
Now, first of all, let's establish that briefly. Where is Gaza?
Well, Gaza is one part of Palestine. I'm sorry, one part of Palestine that's been carved out of the current Palestine includes Gaza and the West Bank. It used to include the whole area that is now Israel, Gaza, and the West Bank, but has been reduced slowly, decade by decade. And I don't know if you can get a close-up of this, but it would be nice if you could, because it would show people exactly how Palestine has been reduced from 1946 here to 2000 here. The green is Palestine and the white is Israel. And so this has been even further reduced because this was 10 years ago. So it's important to understand here in the United States, the underlying narrative is that it's Israel defending itself from Palestinians. But what's forgotten is that it's Israel occupying Palestine, not Palestine occupying Israel. So, did that answer your question?
Sure.
And just so you can get an idea what happened, she joined in London. I and most Americans joined in Istanbul, about 30 of us, and went on from Istanbul.
And the funding came from what? Your own personal resources, or?
Well, we paid $150 to join the group, and then after that, what we paid was, if we were driving a vehicle, we paid fuel and repairs. In this case, once we joined in Istanbul, there was supposed to be, last July an American group had done this, and the Egyptians had confiscated about 45 trucks, and they were supposed to be in Istanbul for us, but the Egyptians didn't get them there. So we went by bus, Faith and I, and about 30, 35 other people that joined the convoy. We were on buses because we didn't have our trucks. So.
Now, I want to come back to some of the historical aspects of how this has transpired, and also focus on what the current conditions are in Gaza as what you saw. I've been to the Middle East there as well. I've been throughout that area into Israel myself and done an extensive amount of traveling. And please correct me if I'm wrong here. My understanding is that the United Nations, Britain, United States, essentially carved out this area and took people there and deposited them there in the 1940s, 1948 time frame. And these were essentially German Jews and other immigrants that were supposed to be taken in initially by the United States and Britain, but a lot of them weren't, and they were put in concentration camps in Australia. At the end of the World War II, they transported these people that were European Jews and placed them on land that was belonging to the Palestinians, and they actually bulldozed houses down with people in them. They murdered little kids, they killed elderly people, and murdered these people and took their land away from them. And I'm just wondering, how many Americans would stand for that? How many Americans would appreciate if someone came in and took a big chunk of Texas or San Diego and said, okay, this is Israel, and just took your house and took your shopping center and took your stuff, and it's injustice, and people don't have a perception that our country is doing these terrible things. And now they're saying that the people that are fighting back are terrorists, and those people are people that are crazy, and that. Am I pretty much hitting it on all cylinders right there when I'm telling that part of the story?
You're saying accurately what the propaganda is here in the United States. They're not terrorists, they're people like we are. But as you point out, when they take your land, when they kill your family, when you don't have a home, when all you have is your life, you may very well, at least I could see myself doing that, and I've never seen that before. They killed my kids, killed Faith, drove me out of my house, bulldozed it. Yeah, I might strap a bomb on. What else do I have to give?
Now, let me make a point on that, and I want you to finish that. People need to realize that the same government that treated my family like second-class citizens in Alabama, making domestic policy, was also making international policy overseas. The same government that allowed my family to be lynched, my church to be bombed, that didn't allow my grandmother and my mother to go in the front door of a train station or use the public restroom, that very same government, the United States government, also decided international policies which were horrendous. And I went to bed at night hearing Molotov cocktails explode in Birmingham and machine gun fire right here in the United States. And so I'm imagining that some kids in Lebanon and in Israel and Gaza Strip are suffering the same. Would you not
Especially
agree?
in Gaza, yes.
When we were in Gaza, when we finally did get in Gaza, and it was very difficult for us to get there because there were, Egypt was doing everything the Egyptian government was doing everything possible it could to prevent us from going into Gaza.
Why? Why would they? What's the motivation?
I believe it's because they're getting $1.3 billion in military aid from the United States, and they've been told that they need to cooperate with Israel on security issues. There's no other explanation. Because we were bringing in medicines, humanitarian aid, everything had been cleared, but they kept putting up roadblocks, including bringing in riot police and beating up quite a few of us when we were in Al Arish, Egypt.
They beat up American citizens?
They did.
Yeah, let me just qualify this. When we say Egypt did this, the Egyptian government did this.
Right.
We've both sat on the street in Egypt having a meal, and you couldn't hardly get a bite in because people are coming by and patting you on the back and saying how happy we are to see you and glad that you're trying to break the blockade into Israel.
Mm-hmm.
But the Egyptian government is something else. And we were in the middle of a police riot, Faith and I,
Mm-hmm.
and about 7 or 8 other people. And 4 of them were beaten fairly severely. I kind of escaped because Faith and 3 other women had locked arms. And I was locked arms with them. When they pulled me, they pulled back. And for some reason, they didn't start whomping on me.
Tell me about the conditions that you saw there.
In Gaza.
It's horrendous. I mean, they have not been able to rebuild any of the bombed out buildings from the December 2008 22-day war, where homes were destroyed. There are about 20,000 people who are still without adequate housing because Israel's blockade means they're not letting in any construction materials whatsoever. So while people who had been there last year or 6 months before told me that there was considerable cleanup work that had been done, although there was still a lot yet to be done, they haven't been able to rebuild. So you have people still living in tents. Electricity, because they destroyed electricity plants, they destroyed water and sewer treatment plants. There's all this stress going on. They destroyed farmland. And in fact, the farmland, most of it, if you know Gaza, is in the areas where it is beside the border with Israel. But the Israeli army decides that that's no man's land, and they bomb it every day. And when we were in Gaza, we heard the bombs dropping. In fact, 2 people were killed from bombs while we were there in 36 hours. So the war hasn't stopped.
So what I'm hearing is that basically people that were victimized by Hitler, victimized by the Nazis during World War II have now become the perpetrators of horrendous acts.
Correct.
That's what's happened, and it's not true to say it's Jews that are doing it.
Mm-hmm.
There's a group of Jews that are called Zionists. They started in 1895, and they felt they were owed land in Palestine. And the movement kind of puttered along until World War II, and Hitler killed so many Jews. Killed a greater percentage of gypsies, but they killed a lot of Jews. And after World War II, there was great pressure to put on Europe to do something, and the United States to do something about the Jews. Now, the Jews were horribly mistreated in Europe, but not by Palestinians. So why should Palestine pay for what had been done in Europe? And that's a question they often ask, and there's no answer.
So the American people are dumbed down they really don't know this history, most of them. And with our schools being cut back in terms of education, the prospects of people learning about this in the future could be bleak. The other part of this is how can we be giving $1.3 billion or any kind of billion dollars to any other country when we're in debt and people are fighting over universal health care, yet we're giving billions of dollars to Israel and Egypt and other countries for military assistance?
Just to give you an example, we're giving $500 per person to the people of Israel.
In military aid.
That have universal health care, that have about a 6-7% unemployment rate. We don't have health care, and we're running 12 or 13%. I mean, if you get the true unemployment rate. But those dollars could be used here at home, and I think Americans would have to see something other than aggression on the part of the Israelis to justify the money we're giving them.
If I might say one more thing too, one of the problems in the United States is that the media, the mainstream media, gets their narrative about the situation from a very strong Israeli public relations dynamic. I mean, it's extremely strong, and they are fed what to say about it. And so the narrative is always presented as objective, yet it's objective in it's not really, because it's pro-Israel, and you can use certain words that imply things that aren't true. It's very hard to get. It was very hard for us to get any interviews with the mainstream media that allowed us to tell the real story, because there was an assumption made from the beginning what the story should be like. So that's why it's so important that you're having this interview.
Right now, I mean, if you're searching for a solution, I think a lot of people are. Hamas is the elected government of Palestine.
Which our government opposes.
Right.
Which our government opposes. Our government called for an election. There were observers from all around the world, and Hamas was elected. It's a big surprise to the people in Washington.
So they talk about democracy and spreading democracy around the world. Then when people elect democratically those who they don't like, then
they say, no,
sorry,
you can't do
you're
that.
Out.
Exactly. Hamas now is calling, well, the United Nations has called not a retreat to this little chart here, not what was given to Israel in 1948. They're calling for Israel to go back to the borders prior to 1967. That's what the United Nations wants. Hamas is saying, we will accept that. We can get along with Israel if they go back to those borders. The only one holding up the peace process is Israel. They would have to accept those borders, and it's much more than they were given.
So the American people have been duped once again in this propaganda campaign and miseducated.
Mm.
Yes?
If I might just add another thing too, is I think it's really important to understand that in Israel there's a lot of opposition. There's opposition to what the policy of the government is doing. In fact, there's opposition by soldiers who have served in the field. There's a website called Breaking the Silence, which is a very interesting place to look at. It's soldiers who have been there and done that saying, this is really what's going on. And there are peace groups of all sorts inside Israel. Unfortunately, they're a minority, like the peace groups here in the United States. But they do exist, and it's important to remember that, too.
That's a very important point that you just made. I'm glad you said that about the soldiers, because I write a column called Left Hook, which is published in local papers here, and I was called a liar when I talked about the atrocities of the Israeli military during one of their latest military campaigns. And then the soldiers came out, the Israeli soldiers came out and quantified my statements in terms of the genocide, the murders, the way that children were killed, elderly people were bulldozed down in their homes and killed. And this is just an atrocity. And the American public is not aware of what's really happening to the Palestinians, who are being painted as the bad guys.
Mm-hmm.
So they called you a liar. They didn't say, Walter, where did you get your information? They didn't say, can we discuss this? No, you're a liar. And anyone that puts out a report, and there's been many of them, about over 60 times, the United Nations has voted that Israel should do something, and they defied them each time. And they just go their own way. When Saddam Hussein defied the United Nations 2 or 3 times, we invaded. Different, huh?
So I'm hearing that the government in Israel is ignoring democratic process. I'm hearing that people are being starved to death. People are using donkeys. They don't have transportation. There's a lack of modern conveniences. There are opportunities for them. When I was in Israel, they blew a whistle for people to come in and out. Palestinians come in and out of Jerusalem, for example. They've been painted as terrorists. They've been painted as insurgents and all these other names that are the words used to inflame people in terms of turning against. And yet the United States government appears to be supporting these atrocities. How can that happen? How can that be, and that the American people don't realize that?
The Israeli lobby is very, very strong. And in the United States, if you want to run for president, you have to get $350 to $500 million, and that's the easy part. You have to not offend big groups that lobby, and the Israeli lobby is very, very strong. It's supported by both the Democrats and the Republicans, and they're using our money to really sponsor terrorism.
So that's the question. Who is the real terrorist?
That is the question.
Who are the real murderers?
People who are being bombed, if you look at the people who are being thrown out of their houses, if you look at the people who, if they have an olive grove 2 miles away and it's been in the family for 400 years, and suddenly a highway is built that only Israeli people can go on, and you can't cross it except at certain places, and you may have to wait 4 or 5 hours, then you've been deprived of your property in any, and that happens. It isn't just an isolated incident.
I like to, you know, for people to understand the situation, it's good, like you said, to bring it home. And if, let's say, Mexico said, you know what, California belongs to us. You took it from us, it belongs to us, and came and occupied California and did to California what the Israelis are doing to the West Bank, for instance, we might have a different view as to how we would react. I think we would be resisting that occupation, and we would believe we had a right to resist that occupation. That's exactly what's happening in Palestine, in the West Bank, and in Gaza.
So they're saying that, okay, you had this avocado orchard, but we're going to build Interstate 15 through it, and by the way, you can't cross it.
Right.
And you can't drive on it.
Because you are not one of us.
Right.
You are not a Mexican, so you can't cross over 15.
You got it. That's it.
How many Americans would accept that?
No. I don't.
Not this one. And I hope none of you people out there, you know.
We're coming down to our last minutes. This has been really good. You're going to have to come back, okay? Because we're going to have to continue this. What is the message you want to leave with the public in our last minutes here?
President Obama has called the Palestinian people, the people of, how's the quote go?
There's
no one who suffered more than the Palestinian people. That's what he said a year ago. But he wasn't president then, so he couldn't do anything. He's president now. And if we made him president, let's have him go to Palestine. I mean, it's a free country. He can go there. And if you look in the news, by the way, in order to break the siege of Gaza, there's going to be an international group of ships sailing to Gaza.
Let's wrap it up with the message you want to say, because we have like 2 minutes left.
Keep an eye on that convoy.
Yes. Well, I think as people would ask me, why did I join the convoy? When I went through Europe, a lot of people would ask. And I said I joined because as an American citizen, I feel like I have to stand up and speak out against the fact that our government is giving $2.77 billion a year in military aid alone to oppress a whole people, to support Israel's occupation of a land that is internationally recognized as illegal. So I felt I had to stand up and speak out against that.
Well, thank you so much for coming. I definitely want to have you back again, maybe in April, or if that it'll be convenient for you to come back and give an update and continue to tell this fascinating story. And I'd like to do an interview on you and put it on internet television just as well. We have to start building tools of mass construction, not weapons of mass destruction. That's what's wrong right now. We're going the wrong way. We're not living up to the creed of this nation, and it never has. We never were a country of free people. We were enslaved by a capitalist system that takes away our homes, that takes away our fortunes, sends our children away to fight in false flag attack battles that shouldn't be fought. And that's what the Community Coalition is all about. We're about peace. We're about developing a symbiotic relationship with the environment. We are about universal love and finding ways to make our community a better place to live. And we encourage you to come out and become involved with us. Look at our website, get involved, come and be a part of our audience here and be a part of our television crew, which is run by everyday citizens from all walks of life. And by the way, I want to thank you for working so hard on a TV show. You're usually behind the camera. It's real nice to get you in front of the camera this time. I want to thank you for joining us, and I want to encourage you to look at our other television shows that come on at 6 p.m. Elise Smith Cooper's show, and also Sundays, and 9:30 on Thursdays we have Laura Thompson's show. And we have 2 additional shows with Chad McKinney's Truth to Power, and we have Javen Jackson's show, The Love Expression Connection. And so thank you very much for joining us. I'm your host, Walter Davis. Thank you so much.